I want to do a quick, well, I don't know how quick it'll be, talk about grief. I never lost a mom or dad. I don't know my father. I never have. He and my mom divorced when I was newborn. I have lost a friend, a sister. She was like a sister to me. Her mom used to say we were like conjoined twins or something. We were always with each other and around each other. We did everything together. 18 years. We lived together 17 of those 18 years. And at first it was just because we were both going to college, you know. And she was having trouble studying at her house because her house was really busy. And she used to come over to my apartment, and I was having trouble with panic disorder and stuff like that. And so we decided to move in together. It would be mutually beneficial for both of us. She was used to panic disorder. Her mom had it. One night, we'd been living together 18 years at this point. She was married. And yes, we still lived together when she was married. She told her fiance when he asked her to marry him, either it's me and Tanya or I don't marry you. Because my health was not good enough at the time. Because we were just getting used to the fact that I did have seizures and figured it out. I've had seizures all my life, but no one knew because it's not. My doctor calls them partial seizures. I can see you, I can hear you, I can't move, I can't react. That's my most common. And she didn't want me living alone back when we first moved in together. And she started having trouble. And she'd had trouble for a couple of years about laying down to sleep. But we thought it was maybe like a panic attack thing or maybe asthma. And she had brought it up to the doctors a couple of times, and they did tests. They didn't find anything. She's hurting. She's coughing. And she was a smoker, so we put that down to smoker's cough. And then she just starts getting worse. And so her husband and I both thought, well, she's caught a cold or maybe borderline pneumonia, something like that. And so it took us 2 days to convince her to go to the doctor. Finally, she and her husband went to the ER. She drove herself to the ER but I stayed. If it was not severe, one of us would stay home and let the whole family know, listen, this is what's going on. And that way, nobody had to rush to the hospital or nothing, and we just expected it was either the beginning of pneumonia, bronchitis, or cold. And she called me. And she says, well, I've got a blood clot in my lung. And this is around 11:30 at night. She got to the ER at 9:30 in the morning. She says, I got a blood clot in my lung. This is April 8th. And they give me some medicine. I'll have to stay here for a few days. I said, okay, I'll try to get up there in the morning because I didn't drive. I'd have to wait on a ride. And she was phobic about doctors and hospitals. Severe phobia. And I told her I loved her. Like I said, we were like sisters. And that I would see her tomorrow. If she couldn't sleep, give me a call. Because I know how she is about hospitals. I was in the ER one time and she almost set the gurney to rolling because she's sitting there playing with the settings on the gurney brakes. She can't handle hospitals. She just had to do something. And then I get a text a little while later from her husband at this point. And he said, Danny's getting sent. We were in a little town called Sullivan, which is about 45 minutes southwest of St. Louis. They said they're sending her to Big St. John's. There was a reason they didn't do the life flight. I think it was the weather. But they put her in an ambulance and they sent her to another town called Washington, which is on the way. And she rested 6 times between Sinclair and Washington, which is only about 15-20 minutes. And I said, is she going to be okay? And he said, no, she's in a coma. He said, no, damn it, no. And I said, I need to get up there. And they said, well, tomorrow morning her niece is coming through. She'll pick you up on the way, and you can meet us at Big St. John's. Because I'm legally blind. I don't drive. So I'm at home alone all this time. And that was a problem for me because I was 35 and I had never really spent more than a few hours alone at this point of my life, in my life. So it was frightening. And by 9 o'clock on April 9th, 2011, Danny was gone. They're not sure because her parents chose not to have an autopsy. So we're not completely sure what had happened. But we think when she lost a baby and no one said anything about her getting a D&C, she was never admitted to the hospital. Nothing. She was just sent home. And they think that threw a blood clot. And she was my world. She was my best friend, my sister. I did not speak to my blood mother for 18 years partly because I was living with Danny, mostly. My stepfather didn't like her. He didn't want me living. He wanted me living, and so did my mother, somewhere they approved of. They didn't like the lack of control, so I had to choose. And I wanted my own life, so I didn't talk to them for 18 years. And just before Danny died, my stepfather had died of liver cancer. So my mother and I actually started talking a little bit. And I remember I called a Sunday school teacher of mine who knew me as a teenager, a young teenager, young kid. It's her fault I talk so much. She wouldn't let you sit in her class and not talk, but that's a rabbit trail. And I was so angry and so upset. And I screamed at her, why did God do this? Why Danny? Why my Danny? Why my friend? To be honest, Danny and I never thought Danny would be the first one to die. We thought I would. And I was okay with that. My world fell apart. Completely and totally. So badly that her dad spent that night at my place because her dad and her mom were afraid I would kill myself. And to be honest, I can't say what I would have done if I had to spend that first night by myself. Some other stuff went on, and I had to wind up kicking her husband out of the house. They had some problems in their relationship, and Danny was thinking about divorce, and I had told her, I'll go with you to the lawyers. They'd only been married about 2 years at this point. But that's neither here nor there. But he turned out to be a real sleazebag. I never did like him. And I had to kick him out of the house. And then come to the funeral, Danny's brother's death. And a lot of the friends of the family are deaf. It kind of divided the church. We had the hearing people over here and then the deaf people over here. But the interpreter couldn't make it. She was a family friend as well. Her mom calls me over 10 minutes before the funeral's to start. And they asked me to sign the funeral. That was the last time I used my sign language. And I'm not good. I can understand more sign language than I can sign, partly because of my cerebral palsy and my limited vision. I was depending on paraphrasing, and I was watching the hard of hearing in the group were feeding me some of the signs so I wouldn't mess it up. I flat refused to sign the prayer at the graveside. I was too broken up. I went home and started packing a 2,400 square foot house, not including garage, by myself. For the next 10 years, I lived in the past. 10 years. I went to counseling and found a counselor I really liked. And I told her this grief thing, I should be over it by now. And she said, "Do you think grief is just limited to family? To spouses?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I was just her best friend. I helped pick out her coffin. I picked out her clothes to be buried in, her jewelry. And she said, "Tanya, you were in an 18-year-long friendship. And you've heard me talk about, if you've seen this channel, some of the wrong things that went wrong at the backside of that relationship. It went from best friends to controlling, and I never saw it. But I wasn't ready to address that in my head and my heart. I was so devastated, I couldn't figure out how to pick out clothes for the funeral. There was no one there to tell me what to wear. There was no one there to tell me what I could eat. There was no one there to tell me when to shower and how long I could use the hot water. I was used to that. And that control, I was so used to it, I actually thought it was normal and thought I was happy with it, and then I didn't have it. And that was another part of the devastation and the grief. I was not only missing my best friend, but I was missing the control that I had lived under. And my therapist said, that's part of grief too. It's just like a spouse. I said, she wasn't married. We weren't married. We were just good friends. She said, you lived 18 years in the same house with this woman. You're allowed to grieve just like everybody else. I finally went through the process of getting pissed, feeling sorry for myself. Finally, I got to thinking, Danny Lynn was very capable. She was going to be a sharpshooter in the military before her mother got brain cancer. And Danny decided not to. She decided to stay home with her mama. And she went to a community college instead. Brilliant. Her IQ was, no kidding, genius level. She was a member of Mensa. She was so smart. And I moved into this apartment 2 years ago, and that's when I was looking at something on YouTube about cults, and I was like, oh my God, because that was the first time I realized, listen, she may have been my best friend, but it wasn't healthy. But that's not the point. The point is 10 years. I would cry at the drop of a hat. I would always be doing something and think, Danny would love this. Sometimes I'd even turn to talk to her. And I would be devastated all over again because she wasn't there. You can take however long you need to grieve. There is no time limit on grief, and there is no set, you're going to go through the pissed off stage at 2.1 minutes or whatever. There's no schedule to grief. And whatever people say, you never get over a loss. You get through it. You don't get over someone being gone. It still hurts my heart. My heart's racing just talking about it. You learn to live in spite of your loss. And I got to thinking, Danny was so capable, always taking care of other people. How would she have been affected had she survived the blood clot that went to her lungs? And then, I don't know, her heart, brain, wherever. If she had come out of that coma and she had been disabled, I would have been by her side every step. I would have taken care of her. But that's not the point. I got to seeing that Danny would not have been happy. She couldn't have survived like that. Mentally, she was too strong and not someone who would be able to survive the switch from perfectly capable and taking care of everybody else to someone taking care of you. And then I stopped. And I was writing, just writing whatever came down, and put the pen down, and I looked down at the paper. And I had written, maybe it's a blessing she died. I felt so guilty for writing that sentence that I scribbled it out and tore up the paper and threw it away. My counselor asked me, why do you feel guilty for telling the truth? If you see that as the truth, then you shouldn't feel guilty. It's part of your healing process too. I was mad at her for dying. That's part of it too. But you can get through and learn to live in spite of your loss. Does it make the loss any less profound? Excuse my language, but hell no. Hell no. And if you need to live for 10 years in your mind and in a place where that person was still there to function, you do what you need to do. There will eventually come a place where you can function and find a modicum of happiness even though that person is gone. But nobody can tell you how long that time period is. And no one can tell you, go get over it. You don't. You never do. You get through it. It took me 8.5 years to start getting rid of things that I had kept that was Danny's. To realize that Danny was not in objects. To know in my heart she's not going to be mad at me looking down from heaven because I didn't keep every last thing of hers. And I know she's in heaven. Danny and I had our problems. She needed mental help just like I did. And it came out for the both of us in different ways. She needed that control. I was okay with being controlled. I guess you could say we kind of had a toxic relationship both ways because I let her get away with it. So I'll accept my blame. But she's still the best friend I've ever had. Well, strike that. I have another best friend that I'm as too close to, or actually closer to than I was with Danny, because our friendship is an even keel. It's like a teeter-totter that's balanced. It just sits there. There's no unequal yoke in this friendship. In several of my friendships now, I've learned how to have a healthy friendship. And I've learned one thing really well that was very hard for me to learn after Danny died. It's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence. Someone asks after someone dies, even if it's 5 years down the road, are you okay? It's okay to say no. I'm not okay. Oh, you're going to get over it. It's okay to say no. I may go around it, I may get through it, but I'll never get over it. Because if they're saying you'll get over it, they've never been through it. Be angry. Get pissed off at them for dying and leaving you alone. That's healthy. Holding it back and putting on a face where you're okay, that's not. So what if it's been 5 years? So what if it's been 10 years? You'll work it out when you can, when you're healthy enough in your heart and your mind, that God will heal you. If you don't believe in God, fine. Universe, spirit, Gaia. I don't care what you call him. Him, her, them, they, whatever. I don't care if you pray to Krishna. You'll get to where you have a healthy mindset. Sometimes you're going to need help. Counseling is not anything to be ashamed of. I've been in counseling on and off since 1997. It's now 2022. I'm finally mentally healthy enough that I can say I don't need counseling right now. But just like physical therapy for my legs and my cerebral palsy, I'm smart enough to know there's going to be times when I need it again. And there's no shame in that. None. So it wasn't your spouse or your brother, your mother or your father. So it was just a friend or an acquaintance from high school. I don't give a flying frog. Even if it's your pet, it hurts. And if it hurts, that means you're alive. You're alive. And you feel guilty because it wasn't you that died. Then you feel pissed because they left you alone. How dare they do that? How dare they? I can't function without her. I can't do any of this by myself. No. At that point, if you can say that, then no. You can't do it by yourself. You need help. And you need to accept the help. There's no shame in that. When you can say, I think I'm ready to try, and start walking just like that baby taking that first step, or the 5-year-old, or the 12-year-old, or the 17-year-old. I did it all 3 times. Well, 4 if you count the first time. Just like that child or that puppy taking the first step. Have you ever seen a litter of puppies when they're first born and they're trying to stand up and they wiggle like this and then they fall? But pretty soon after they're born, they're moving. You have to get born into the other side of the grief. You have to go through the mess before you can clean it up. And that comes with a whole host of emotions. And don't you let anybody tell you you shouldn't feel them. Don't you say that. If you lock all those emotions away, you're going to have a nervous breakdown. Because the human spirit can't handle it all alone. We just can't. But if you accept help when you're ready and you're tired of being alone in your grief and you need to find a way through it to clean up the other side, then you reach out. and you never be ashamed for taking a hand to help you. But if you're not ready for that, then okay, accept that. If you need to be in that grief a little while longer to accept what happened, then you do it. You'll eventually learn to walk. But you got to go through the hell first. And it hurts. And some people, without that support, I'll be honest, some people don't make it. At Danny's funeral, her mother was in a wheelchair because she had health problems of her own. And we were in church, and they had moved her wheelchair aside to let the pallbearers come through. And there was a flight of steps right near her. She was pretty much backed so that she was safe. She wasn't going to go down the steps if you bumped her wheelchair or nothing, but she had her back to the steps. All of a sudden, I saw her husband turn around and her brother, Danny's Uncle Kenny, and they grabbed her chair. And I heard, "Peg, no." Without that support, her mother would have thrown herself down those basement stairs because she couldn't stand to see her baby girl come through in that coffin past her to go to the cemetery, which is right up the hill. Some people don't have someone to grab them to say, no, don't do that. If you do have someone to grab a hold of you and hold you up when you can't, you allow it. Then, when you get through the event and you start to heal, it's still going to hurt sometimes. But there will be happiness again. And your loved one's looking down on you from heaven. And they're smiling because they know you can get through it. They may not be there in physical body, but Danny's still here. She still watches me. My grandfather's still here. My grandmother's still here. They watch me from heaven. They're just physical bodies are gone. That's what I believe. If you don't believe in God and heaven, that's whatever. But don't throw yourself down the stairs. Grab onto someone and say, I can't do this. If Danny's dad wasn't there that night, I'll be honest, I probably would have killed myself willingly just so that I could be buried next to her. I would have done it. I would have. There were several times in that 10 years, if I didn't have the counselor to talk to, or my friend Sean, who I met a week before Danny died, and we quickly became best friends, or my friend Ann, who knew Danny. I've known that lady for almost 24 years now. And they let me scream. They let me rail. Not long after Danny died, I was living on my own, and I called a family. She's not a family friend. She's family. Her name is Sheila. She's my mother's best friend in high school's daughter. She literally grew up with me and my sister. We literally shared the same crib. We were all about 2 years apart. In fact, my name is Tanya. My sister's name is Christy. Sheila's sister, half-sister's name is Tanya. Her brother's name is Chris. And Sheila, I told her, I says, I can't do this. I can't be alone. I was having physical problems. I couldn't barely I was in an 18 by 24, I think, trailer, little bitty trailer. I couldn't, after I packed up our 24 square foot house, 100 square foot house by myself, cleaned it, still didn't get the deposit back because the landlord's a slumlord jerk, but I was in this little trailer, owned by the same landlord. The plug-ins and the walls were duct taped. The windows were screwed shut. Bad trailer. And I told her, I said, I can't even make it to the bathroom. I don't know what's wrong, but I have to crawl to the bathroom and I can't make it. And I'm still so full of grief, I can't do this. I don't know what to do. By 8 a.m. that next morning, her and her husband were at my house. And they lived a couple hours away. And they moved me down with them, no questions asked for. And I stayed there for about a year. I lost my grandpa shortly after that. I moved in with my grandpa. I tried moving out between Sheila's and Grandpa's on my own. I didn't know enough to do it. I didn't know enough to budget and take care of the billing, and I was messing it up, and we didn't know why. Dyscalculia is what I've got. It's like dyslexia, but with numbers, and that's what was causing the billing mistakes. So I moved in with Grandpa. Shortly after Grandpa died, Sean, who'd come up for his 1 week vacation a year, we get to see each other because he had moved to North Carolina. And he started teaching me how to budget when he realized I didn't know what I was doing. And started teaching me how to get out of debt. I've learned a lot. But even so, I can honestly say I don't know where I would be mentally, emotionally, spiritually right now if Danny had survived. But I'm healthy enough now to see that things happen the way they have to sometimes. I still miss her. I still want to cry sometimes. But I have happy times now too. And I knew, looking back, I needed 10 years. I desperately needed 10 years to barely even move forward because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to let go of that grief. I wasn't ready to get through the hole to the other side. You may not be ready yet either. You may be telling me, Tanya, I'm never going to be ready. I'll never get over this. No, you won't. You'll get through it if you let someone help you. You'll get through it. But don't ever think it has to be on their schedule. Your heart, your mind goes on your schedule. You need 10 years, you take it. But, and here's the codicil, if you're going to take the 10 years, you got to take the help. No matter how much your timetable is for you personally. If you can't stand alone yet, you take the help. Because you're helping no one by killing yourself. You're helping no one by giving up on yourself. You're just hurting people you leave behind. And I can say that because I've tried to kill myself 3 times in my life before I realized that. How selfish I was. But honest to God, I'm so glad that all 3 times there was someone there to stop me. I'm glad of that. And if you think you might be a danger to yourself, you get help. You call 911. You call that friend of yours and go, get over here. I'm not sure what I'm going to do to myself because I'm so hurt and so upset and I need help. And later, when you've made it to the other side of whatever event you're going through and you're on more stable ground, you turn around and you remember in your mind and in your heart what you went through to get there. And then you look forward and you look for someone who needs the hand that you grasped onto to make it through. And you say, I made it through. Let me help you. Let me help you. Because you will get stronger. You will come out the other side. You may never know why whatever happened in your life happened, but you don't need to. You just need to know you're strong enough to make it through. And then your job is to help someone else, just like someone else helps you. I hope this helps. If you're dealing with grief and you don't feel you have anyone to talk to, please call 911. Call the mental health hotline. I don't know the numbers. If someone does, would you please put it in the comments? I'm legally blind and we're finding that stuff is hard. But you call someone. You get the help you need. And realize that just because it feels like the world ended doesn't mean it really did. You're here for a reason on this planet. It's not to let grief take care of you and you let go of the world. It's so that you can get through whatever monster you're facing, and then you help another fellow human being. Because if we don't help each other, we're all doomed to fail. I love you, all of you. God loves you too. You will survive the grief. No matter if it's your husband, your sister, your lover, your mother, your child, or your father. No matter who it is. Even if it's your pet dog or cat. You will make it through. Just extend your hand for the help that you need. God bless. Take care.